Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for being here. And hopefully we'll keep the energy level high now that you've been able to refill during the pause. Let's start with a bit of interactivity, if you don't mind. How many of you have had sort of first-hand experience in buying or selling or intermediating any kinds of carbon offsets? Hands up. Okay. And how many have had first-hand experience with carbon removals? Okay, some. Very good. Fewer, but some. So the assumption is that next year there will be more hands, and so it develops also on the carbon removals side. Well, let's just define what Puro.earth is. We are first and foremost a standard for engineered carbon removal. So a set of methodologies that describe how carbon dioxide is removed from the circulation, removed from biosphere. We also run a registry where we maintain and manage the integrity of the certificates that are issued by us to our suppliers of negative emissions. And we consider ourselves to be an innovation platform of some sort because there's a tremendous amount of innovation taking place around the world in this area, in carbon removal. And many of them are sort of contacting us and asking if they could be part of our framework. There's some of the methodologies and some of the challenges that are being overcome are in areas where we thought a couple of years ago that these are very difficult or unsurmountable challenges, but now people are coming up with ways of getting across them. The most, or let's say not important, but most visible part is a B2B marketplace where our suppliers can sell what they have produced. So that's if you go to our website, that's what you would probably notice first. We're also working on something called Comprehensive Carbon Removal Funding Framework, which is a bit of a mouthful, but helps our suppliers further grow by providing them means for long-term offsets and offtake agreements, and also equity and debt funding. So project financing framework in a way. And since the 1st of June this year, we've been part of the Nasdaq family. So Nasdaq Corporation invested in us, and we are now sort of working together with them quite tightly. And that was noticed for example, in Wall Street Journal. Here are some of our current reference customers. I think it's worthwhile mentioning that Microsoft had 189 offers last year in their RFP, and they chose 5 engineered carbon removal projects, and 3 of them came from us. Of course, Swiss Re is very vocal on these matters, and so are the others here. So the good part of the good side, the good news is that there are already ways of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But unfortunately, things just tend to take time. Here's an image of Jimmy Carter in the 70s speaking enthusiastically about the benefits of solar power panels. But just right about now, they are sort of reaching price parity, and they are becoming mainstream. So it takes a lot of time for things to develop, and that's a bit of a worry because we don't have 50 years this time. We need to move a lot quicker. And that's why we want to accelerate the development. Otherwise, we would see this sort of a red curve over there that is slowly starting, but that's just too slow. We need to figure out a way to accelerate the development as quickly as we can on the negative emissions side. And that's the reason why we created the carbon removal marketplace for the acceleration to take place. And just to be clear, the traditional offsets on the left side over there are very the state of the art in many ways in the carbon markets, but we all only focus on the carbon removal side, where the if you have to emit 1 ton of CO2, then by removing it from circulation, you can reach carbon net zero. And since we were a bit like a new kid in the block, we've wanted to make it quite, let's say, diligently, and established a set of principles that I can discuss in this and the next slide over here. So first and foremost, everybody is responsible for their own emission reductions. That's priority number one. Let's get done with that as quickly as possible. Let's quantify our emissions. Let's figure out how to reduce them as much as possible. Let's get on with the reductions, and then start building some capacity for carbon removal. So our job is to find and verify negative carbon emissions. So all of the methodologies are science-based. It's a bit vague. What does it mean? But that means in our language, it means that all the quantification, for example, is based on measuring and not modeling. These methodologies need to be, it must be possible for them to scale exponentially. The technologies exist, but we just need to make them happen quicker and quicker. So just to sort of define what sort of constitutes carbon removal in our language, that is 3 parts: capturing CO2. That's in a way the easiest part. You can basically plant a forest, or you can throw a lot of money into a direct air capture facility and put the CO2 in a bottle. But that's not sufficient, of course. That's not a long-term storage for that. So in order for something to qualify as carbon removal, you also have to stabilize it, like in the way of biochar. If you consider that the forests, when they are growing, they are sequestering or capturing this CO2, and then it's stabilized into biochar, and then that is stored in the soil. That's one example of this. Alternatively, you could think of capturing CO2 from a bioenergy plant and transporting it instead of stabilizing it into an well where it can be injected down below. So that's also carbon net negative process, and it is stored for a very long time. And that's carbon removal. So to make a long story short, what we've tried to identify are the least disputable methods, and that has led us to materials that are carbon net negative and other processes that are easy to quantify. And by the way, in terms of quantification, we've always taken the most conservative approach, and also on the baselines we are not looking at avoided emissions at all. And of course, long permanence. What does long permanence mean is a good question, and I think the jury is still out. What will be the minimum requirement for high quality carbon removals? My assumption is that it will be at least 100 years. It may very well be also 1,000 years. But let's see. All right. So just to sort of to illustrate what the principles are in our framework, we require the supplier of negative emissions to quantify all the emissions associated with the production of their whatever it is, process or product. That's the upward arrow there. And then the downward arrow is the embodied or sequestered carbon dioxide in the same process. And if that deduction is negative, results in a negative figure, then that process can be determined to be carbon net negative, and the negative part can be decoupled from the product or the process and turned into a digital tradable asset we call the CORC, CO2 removal certificate. And again highlighting that we are not looking at the sort of a scenario where, for example, a carbonated building element is replacing the use of cement-based concrete, which would yield a much higher figure because, of course, if you avoid the usage of concrete, then the starting point is quite high in terms of emissions. But then that is again debatable. What would have been the other alternative? Could it have been actually, wood that was replaced? So instead of just avoiding that sort of a debate, we just chose that let's go with the baseline of 0. Let's not never go above 0 in our baselines. And just a minor point that the physical product, for example, cannot be sold as carbon sink. It cannot be marketed as a carbon sink because, of course, that would be double sales. That attribute, that aspect of that product has been already decoupled and sold separately. All right. So all suppliers are audited. So they come to us with a claim that they run a carbon negative process, and we look at the evidence, and based on that we send it off to a third-party verifier who then makes an audit and provides an audit statement. That's a public document on our website, and it always tells about whether the supplier is eligible for CORCs according to our methodologies or not. The methodologies themselves are, of course, co-created with groups of specialists, and we are using the best available knowledge to make them. And there's a public consultation period as well. All right, so if you are running a business, sometime there will be a realization that I do have emissions, whatever they are. Let's call them that you have emissions of 100 there. And probably you have removals of 0. And now that there's this SBTI and many other initiatives, you need to be consciously reducing your emissions and targeting lower emissions. We do recommend that at the same time you will start to build the removals capacity. And in particular, so that, of course, offsets probably need to be used so that at least in the beginning, because the availability of carbon removals is not perhaps as much as it should be, but eventually the removals should be 100% of the of your offsetting in order to be able to make this net zero claim. That's at least what we expect to see in the SBTI net zero guidance. Theoretically, you could continue further and just remove also all the historical emissions, the way, for example, Microsoft is doing, so that they are running a really carbon negative operation for decades. Or if they are intrinsic to your business operation, these carbon removals, then of course you're free to offer them for sale for others through our framework. Okay, so what are the carbon removal methods? And well, we started out with 3. We started with biochar, carbonated building elements, and wooden building elements. This was back in 2019. And they are all very, I guess, solid. Biochar, we know exactly the degradation of that when it's used as a soil improvement. We know that carbonated building elements, it's very unlikely that the physically or in a chemically bound CO2 will escape or leave the building element ever. So it remains there for a very long time. Building elements are less durable but then again, they are very good and quickly accessible way of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And latest addition was geologically removed carbon, and that is a methodology. It's a sort of a meta-level methodology where just as long as the carbon dioxide comes from biogenic source or atmospheric source, and it goes into a approved cavity, geologic cavity, then it can fit into the geologically removed carbon methodology. And it's actually reflects our way of making methodologies anyway. So they are very sort of broad in a way that they are not project specific. So if you are planning on becoming a supplier in our network framework, it's likely that you don't have to develop your own methodology in there. But then there's a lot of other methodologies coming up. One that is short duration is soil amendments. There we are promising only 20 years of permanence. That's to be seen what is the reception of that. Then again, mineralization or enhanced weathering is coming up hopefully during early part of next year, where minerals like olivine, when they are grinded down in a suitable manner and exposed to, let's say, water, they will start to carbonate. And biomass burial, blue carbon, you name it. There's a lot of things going on over there. So the marketplace itself, like I said, the supplier has to make a claim that they run a carbon net negative business or operation that is verified. Once verification is there, we can issue corks or CO2 removal certificates, and they can be placed for sale in the marketplace. We are actively ourselves reaching out to buyers of negative emissions, and making these, helping make these matches in the marketplace. When the match happens, the money from the buyer, of course, goes to the supplier, and they are contractually obligated to use that money for, either enabling that process or accelerating that process that sequesters carbon dioxide. So the economic acceleration effect is essential, of course, here. And the buyer will get the ownership of the certificate, and they can, of course, later sell it, but or more likely cancel or retire that certificate and define who is the beneficiary and what is the purpose of cancellation, so that they can make a claim of carbon net zero. Okay, all right, finishing up. So this is a bit of a plug for our ecosystem meeting. We will have our fifth ecosystem meeting taking place on the October 12th. So if you would like to learn more, you will be able to hear myself and my boss, Fredrik Ekström from Nasdaq, speaking about future and development of and the significance of carbon removal from their perspective and ours as well as many other companies. I've just raised Suez there, the major, as we know, multi conglomerate. Basically, Suez is talking about their updated business model with which they can sort of transform some of their processes from being carbon emitting sources to actually sequestering carbon dioxide. And of course we're also having the roundtable a little bit later, so happy to continue the discussion there, but now also happy to receive any questions or comments thus far.
Thank you very much.